Hey guys, Kevin here, and I gotta say, I've been really obsessed lately about this new Bitcoin price theory called Supercycle. Essentially, it predicts that Bitcoin will hit $1 million much faster than we ever thought possible. I'm talking about in the next year or two rather than a decade from now. And no, look at my face, I'm not messing with you right now. So, what does supercycle even mean, right? We gotta take a step back and first look at what a regular cycle is. Bitcoin kicked off in 2009, so it's been around for 12 years now. Every 4 years, there's a halving event where the amount of Bitcoin given to miners per block is cut in half. These 4-year periods between halvings are called cycles, and Bitcoin has gone through 3 full ones so far. We're currently on our 4th one. Every cycle, we see a roughly 2-year bull market with some mind-blowing gains, followed by a 2-year bear market where we lose like 80% of that value. And then after the bear market, we chill for a bit, reach the halving, and start all over again, going higher than ever before. But what if I told you that this time it's different, and we won't see this typical cycle play out anymore? And instead, Bitcoin will go higher and higher without facing any large bear market drawdowns again. This is essentially what a supercycle looks like. So in this video, let's chat about the case for a supercycle and touch on some potential criticisms too. I also want to share my own verdict and my personal trading strategy so we don't sell too early nor too late. If that sounds like something you're looking for, and honestly all Bitcoin investors should at least understand this theory, then you are in for a treat. Come on in because it's time for the deep dive. Welcome back to BFB, where we love to focus on that deep research and honest opinions that can help you get the long-term edge in the crypto space. If you watch this video and you think I did a good job for you, then please tap that like button because that would help me out a ton. Alright, so first, let's get on the same page as to what a supercycle is and what it means for the price of Bitcoin. Essentially, the theory says that we won't see a normal cycle because this time it's different. Dan Held, an OG Bitcoiner who currently works for Kraken, really made this theory popular, so shout out to him, and I'll leave his original post down in the description below as well. In his post, he argues that there are 4 main factors that are different this time compared to in previous cycles. The first point is that the world looks very different right now compared to before. We've been in a pandemic for about a year now, and in March of 2020, there was a huge market crash that even affected Bitcoin. To save our financial system, central banks around the world started printing a boatload of money faster than ever before in history. Just look at this chart of the money supplied by the Federal Reserve. Freaking insane. Anyways, investors saw how quickly our governments were devaluing our currency, and they got worried. Before, they didn't have as much of a reason to look at Bitcoin, but now this deflationary asset is looking really appealing, at least as a way to hedge against government shenanigans. This was Bitcoin's moment. This is what it was made for. Bitcoin was shoved onto center stage and everyone took notice. And that brings us to the second point. A new type of investor came to play, aka the institutions. Remember during the bear market a couple years ago, we'd always cry, "Where are the institutions? Come and save us from this bear market." Well, they were taking their sweet time, but now they are entering in droves. Several huge name corporations and funds have put Bitcoin directly on their balance sheet as a hedge against the US dollar. Just to toss out a few names here for you, we got MicroStrategy, Tesla, Square, MassMutual, Guggenheim, and even legendary investors like Stanley Druckenmiller and Paul Tudor Jones. A very important point here is that institutions are different from your everyday retail investors who drove Bitcoin from $1,000 to $20,000 in 2017. These companies and funds aren't going to day trade and panic sell when the price starts dropping. They have diamond hands and they're going to hold Bitcoin for years, if not decades. And I don't know if you've read Cathie Wood's ARK investment report on Bitcoin, but you definitely should. They calculated that if all S&P 500 companies put just 10% of their cash into Bitcoin, that would increase the price of Bitcoin by $400,000. This is massive for us, and we gotta thank Michael Saylor for kicking off this institutional wave for us. The third point is just that we have a much more mature infrastructure around Bitcoin. You don't have to buy Bitcoin using some shady exchanges like Mt. Gox or local Bitcoins anymore. We have a bunch of solid crypto exchanges to choose from, or you can even buy it through PayPal, Robinhood, or Cash App. Institutions also have trusted custodians like BitGo, or can even get exposure through Grayscale's GBTC. We also have these clutch loan products from companies like BlockFi, so you can borrow against your Bitcoin rather than having to sell them for cash. Think about this, right? This is really important because it removes selling pressure from Bitcoiners who want to sell to buy a house or just get some cash to play with. Now you can get a USD loan on your Bitcoin and just pay it back later without selling. None of these products were really mature during the last bull cycle, but now they are here and they are ready for prime time. I hope this gives you a general sense of how things are just so much easier these days for anyone who wants to get involved. The final difference for this cycle is that there's a clean narrative around Bitcoin, and that is digital gold. Let's rewind a bit to 2017 and 2018. There were a lot of distractions pulling people's attention away from Bitcoin. We had the ICO boom where many people bought BTC just to flip it for tokens. We had people calling for Ethereum to flip in Bitcoin. Even within Bitcoin, we had a civil war which led some people to Bitcoin Cash instead. But over the past few years, the market has spoken and the store of value digital gold use case has won out. This is what the community and new investors have embraced too. And this clarity just makes it so much easier for the Bitcoin ecosystem to grow and bring in new participants. Alright, so those are the 4 reasons why we might have a super cycle this time. Doesn't this just make you feel all tingly and even more bullish on Bitcoin? If that's even possible. Okay, that sounds really cool, but what does that tell us about Bitcoin's price action? Let's put some hard numbers on the table. The prediction is that if we are in a super cycle, Bitcoin will reach somewhere between 500,000 to 1 million, blowing even the most optimistic projections out of the water. And I'm not talking about a decade from now. Supercycle proponents are calling for this to happen within the next year or two. You may have your BS radar going off right now, but suspend your disbelief just for a bit. We are currently around $50,000 for BTC. These price targets are only a 10 to 20x increase from where we're at now. If you look at historical price moves for Bitcoin, we've easily done these magnitudes of increases in a short span of time. So even if the number may sound unbelievable, it wouldn't really be that unprecedented. Even Tesla stock went from 85 to 850 in the span of a year. If Bitcoin reached 500K, it would be around the same total market cap as gold, which sounds reasonable to me. Another major part of this prediction is that we'll never see those large 80% bear market corrections ever again. Remember, we saw those before in both 2014 and 18. Supercycle predicts that future corrections will only be around 30 and 40% maximum on our way to $1 million. And after it reaches $1 million, there will only be smaller cycles afterwards. So this may be the last big cycle we ever see. This makes some intuitive sense, right? After all, we can't expect every Bitcoin cycle to always push up the price exponentially as it has in the past. Because if it did do that, it would mean Bitcoin would reach infinity one day. Also, the catalysts for these cycles have been the halving event, but eventually the block emission rate will be so tiny that halving it wouldn't even make a dent at all. Unfortunately, the sad part is that if Supercycle is true, your everyday retail investors who aren't in Bitcoin yet might never get a chance to get some at a reasonable price. They might be priced out forever. And this sucks, in my opinion, because Bitcoin's supposed to be the people's money. We gotta do our role, guys, to get our friends and family into Bitcoin while they still can. Now, as always, you know me, I like to look at both sides of the picture and touch on some arguments against Supercycle Theory, or rather reasons that could prevent Bitcoin's price from moving that way. After all, we gotta be level-headed in this space where it's full of hopium and moon missions. I know it's hard to be, but we gotta try, guys. I personally see 2 general roadblocks. One is that Bitcoin has only ever existed during a macroeconomic boom. It was born after the financial crisis of 2008, and we've been in a giddy bull market ever since. What happens if things eventually turn and we enter a recession? Will Bitcoin be completely divorced from other markets and avoid heavy corrections? I wouldn't be too sure about that. I think Bitcoin will also drop down heavy if that's what happens to the equities, commodities, and real estate markets. What would be a real coincidence here is if any market correction that happens timed up perfectly with Bitcoin's top for the cycle. So that would mean that Bitcoin could still shoot up to massive new highs, but afterwards it would face a steep drop down of more than the 30 and 40% that Supercycle Theory predicts. The second potential roadblock is that this theory doesn't factor in unpredictable government actions. We're expecting reckless money printing to be the new normal and for it to cause runaway inflation sooner rather than later. But what if we slim down our upcoming stimulus packages? What if Jay Powell and Janet Yellen are wizards and are able to right the ship and help the economy recover without inflation? What if they shock us all and decrease the money supply by selling bonds? I know this is a lot of what ifs, but my point is that if any of these things happen, then it does weaken the case for Bitcoin, at least in the short term. And maybe we wouldn't hit the supercycle targets as a result. Also, our beloved Michael Burry of the Big Short fame makes a great point about governments and Bitcoin. He says that Bitcoin may become a victim of its own success. How governments around the world want their own currency to be king, so if Bitcoin ever really threatens their fiscal power, then they will handicap it. I can definitely see this happening, right? Countries around the world like China, India, and Nigeria have already banned Bitcoin or heavily restricted it for their citizens. Things seem okay in the States, but even Secretary Yellen has publicly criticized Bitcoin recently. If Bitcoin gets too powerful during a supercycle, we may see Big Brother step in and interfere. If this happens, I think it would throw Bitcoin off course and we wouldn't see a true supercycle form. Such government action isn't unprecedented either. Almost 100 years ago in the 1930s, the US government seized private citizens' gold with executive orders signed by FDR. I'm not trying to FUD here, but if they ever wanted to take our Bitcoin, they could easily do so from the US-based exchanges if you keep your coins on there. Even if they don't go that far, any such restriction would hold back Bitcoin from supercycle behavior, in my opinion. Now, granted, several of these points are more black swan events, so let's not worry about them for now and let's assume a supercycle will happen. We gotta strategize and think about how to trade it properly. I used to recommend setting laddering sell orders from around 80k all the way up to 250k, since that's the range that most analysts are predicting for this cycle's top. But if we're in a supercycle, that may be way too conservative and you may lose out on a lot of the upside. So here's my tweaked strategy. I'm going to set sell orders based on exponential price targets rather than linear ones. Here's a little something I whipped together that hopefully paints a better picture of what this strategy looks like. I'd sell anywhere from 5 to 15% of my Bitcoin at each of these targets and then hold the rest as a forever bag. However this thing plays out, you should definitely not expect for all of your targets to hit. Maybe just a couple will hit, in which case you should factor in that possibility and adjust your percentages and price targets so that you'd still be happy with the result regardless. I recommend setting your first target somewhere that's likely to hit, or just set it at the price level where you're going to stop buying for now, at least during this cycle. Our goal here is to take some juicy profits and optimize our potential for a super cycle, and yet still hold on to some of our beloved Bitcoin for the long term. I'm very curious to hear what you think about my strategy, or please just share with us what your plan is if we're really in a super cycle. My final thoughts here. I honestly give us around a 40% chance of us being in a super cycle. I think the case is super solid, but I still have my doubts about such a large price increase within the next 12 months. And if we go parabolic, history shows that the price usually breaks down heavily back to previous consolidation levels. So I could still imagine 80% drawdowns even with institutions in the game now. On the other hand, some analysts did predict that Bitcoin cycles were getting longer and longer. So if our current bull market stretched out a bit, we could theoretically end the bull phase back in the consolidation phase right before the next halving, which means that the bear market would be skipped over in the scenario and we'd have a super cycle. That does sound reasonable to me. I guess we'll have to wait and see either way, but I'm not a financial advisor nor a professional analyst or economist, so take all my thoughts here with a grain of salt. I'm just a guy who loves Bitcoin and wants to break things down for you. If you like this video though, please let me know by giving it a quick like, and why not check out some exclusive deals that I left down for you in the links below. Like you can get up to $250 in BTC by using my BlockFi link. Anyways, I had such a fun time making this video for you, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. Cheers.